Dear friends, this is a study that I've put together, and I want everybody to hear about it. So there's a lot of winds of doctrine out there, and I just want to try to be biblical as much as possible. So we have a great Father and a Creator, so help us to understand in Jesus Christ's name. So let me get right into it. We have this 7,000-year prophecy, and it covers over the 7,000-year week of history. Yeah. In the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. This was in Genesis 2 and 5. Adam died 930 years inside the 1,000-year day. Peter in Psalms 90, 2 Peter 3 and Psalms 90, on the context of scoffers will come in the last days saying, where's the sign of your coming of the Son of Man? And he says, be not ignorant of this one thing, that a day is as 1,000 years to God, and 1,000 years is as one day. This is in the context of Christ coming, and he's telling people what to preach. For strong meat. For those scoffers. And we have stories and symbolism of 6,000 and 7,000, or 6 and 7. 6 years, 7 years. There's many different. There's more Bible verses than this. But you got Exodus, Matthew, Mark, Jude, 2 Kings, Job. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have 1,000 all the way to 7,000. And so, we'll begin. A lamb was killed to cover Adam and Eve when they sinned. And we have a Bible verse in Exodus 12, verse 1 through 11. It mentions a lamb was brought into a family during the sanctuary services. And it was kept up until the 4th evening. And then the 4th evening was killed. So, Revelation 13:8 also says that the Lamb, Jesus, who was slain or killed from the beginning of the world. That was a symbol. So this lamb that was killed to cover Adam and Eve was brought in symbolism into this world, to the family, 4,000 years. And at the evening of the 4,000th year, at the very end of it, Jesus, the Lamb, was crucified. And we know the year he was crucified, because we know the year he was baptized. In the 15th year of Tiberius, Jesus was baptized in Luke 3, 1 and 21. So in 12 AD, Tiberius was made co-regent military commander. 12 AD. And Tiberius was on the face of coins no earlier than 12 AD. So 15 years later would be 27 AD. And Luke 3 says, 15th year of Tiberius, Jesus was baptized. So we know in Daniel 9:25 it mentions, in the midst of the week he was be killed. He would take away the sacrifice and oblation. So for his 3.5 years blessed ministry, he preached and was crucified. And then for another 3.5, the apostles took it out, totaling 7 years, which the world uses as a Great Tribulation, 7 years, which they throw down this precious truth. But it's in Daniel 9:25, and that's on another chart. There's about 3 or 4 different ones I'm going to have putting out. So 3.5 years after his 27 AD baptism brings you to 31. The world is having a confusion about that. But focus with the word, and that will lead you. One Jubilee. Jesus many times, 70 times 7, he mentioned. He always spoke of times, a few times. So one Jubilee equals 50 atonement years, or times one freedom. One Jubilee equals one freedom. So we'll read this Bible verse here. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, yet his days shall be 120 years. Days, 120 years. But as the days of Noah were, Jesus said these words in the final days chapter, Matthew 24. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Is he speaking about the bad times of Noah? Or was he speaking about the days of years or of thousands of years? And if you take 120 times one Jubilee or one freedom, because every 50 years was a Jubilee, and that they released everything, released debt, everything was free. So 120 times 50 equals 6,000 years, when it all comes to an end. When the nearness of Jesus Christ's return is. He will come no sooner or no later. These are written long before man ever started coming up with the terms, if we're better, then he'll come sooner, or whatever. No, he'll come when his word says, not based off of man's attitudes. So, 6,000 years, 120 times 50, or one freedom, 50 atonement years. But we have another prophecy, and it's really, really interesting. A possible prophecy of Jesus' return 2,000 years after his death. Now this has a couple of fulfillments. You know, we knew it had fulfillments to the sinful Israel, and possibly Jesus dying on a cross, but it does have a third fulfillment. And here it is. For he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us. In the third day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Hosea 6, 1-3. But if you take a look at different translations of Luke 13:32, there's a couple Bible verses in here. Exodus 19. God told Moses, go down and tell the people to sanctify themselves, purify themselves, for I will come down on the third day. So we are going to do the same. We must. And you must sanctify yourselves. Tell your families, because he will come down the third day after his death. For he hath torn. This is similar to the Isaiah verse, where it says he was strapped, or he was given stripes because of us. Because of our sins, he was striped. He was killed for our being bad or being sinful. For he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, he will bind us up. After 2 days, after 2,000 years since his death, is what it's saying, torn and smitten. after 2 days. But on the third day, at the end, at the evening of the 6,000th year, we'll go and be taken to heaven for the 1,000-year Sabbath reunion. That's the 7,000th year Sabbath. So all these little Sabbaths are pointing to something really grand. So Moses went up into the mountain 40 days. So as Jesus went up 2,000 years. Moses went for 40 days, and you can times that by one freedom for 150, and it comes to 2,000. Exodus and Acts. There's a time of trouble. And Jesus loves us so much. He tells us when it begins. There's no date setting in this venue or this anything that I will hand out. But in Matthew 24, verse 20 and 21, he says, pray that your escaping be not in the winter, nor on a Sabbath day, for then will be great tribulation. He told you it will begin about winter. So any given year, in my other charts, I will have the signs and events that to look for within years to do what he says. There's many winds of doctrine, and we got to be careful. We have to focus on the Word. Now, this is new to me, and I was studying it for a couple of years and really got down into it. And it's time. Day 1, day 2, and day 3. That third day is the third day he will raise us up at the beginning of it. But it has to be the ending of the 6,000th year. And I love Matthew 24, 14, 29 through 31 because it mentions at the end of that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon to blood red, or will not give us light, and the stars will fall, and then you will see the Son of Man coming. So, Daniel 12, verses 1 through 2, because Jesus told us in verse 15, when you see the abomination spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So we go to Daniel, and that's in another chart, and it will make tidal waves, because it will be something precious to learn. But Daniel 12, verses 1 through 2, and Michael shall stand up. See, he sat in judgment. Back in the Old Testament, Old Sanctuary, they sat in judgment. But when he stands up, that means he's finished judging his people, his church. And there's Bible verses in Ezekiel 9, and I think it's in 1 Peter 4, where it talks about judgment happens upon the house of God, the church, and then what will be for the people in the world. So, but anyways, Michael stands up, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was, no, nor ever shall be, and at that time everybody shall be delivered, everyone found written in the book. And then it mentions a resurrection, because that's Jesus' second coming is the only time there will be a resurrection. We'll leave it at that. But verses 1 through 2. Now, if you go to verses 6 through 7, he says, how long shall it be till the end of these events in the scattering of the holy people? And then the angels tells them, it shall be for a time's time and half a time until the end of these events that only were spoken of in verses 1 through 2. The Great Tribulation till the resurrection or Jesus coming was a time's time and half a time. Esther and many other people conclude that that's 3.5 years. Amazing Facts founder Joe Cruz mentioned that the plagues possibly, in Revelation 18, it says, get out of her, my people, don't be partakers of her sins, that you receive not of her plagues, stuff like this. That's like the Great Tribulation plagues that it wasn't the 7 last plagues, but he was mentioning that probably lasts for 1 year. Her plagues come in 1 day. So, the Great Tribulation happens for maybe 2.5 years, and then at the end of that, it goes from bad to worse. World War III is 7 last plagues, I believe. But it would probably all come inside 1 year. Others will say a lot sooner, but if it's World War III, it's going to be strung out. It always has been. But he says a time's time and half a time. We do not date set. But if you judge by this, from 31 AD, April, to about 2031 AD, it would take you to the same month, April. If you minus back 3.5 exact years, it brings us back to 2027 AD, probably around November. Coincidentally, just what Jesus said, pray that your escape and be not in the winter. He's referring to people who try to leave sooner. Because when you do, just like Peter on the water, come out to me, his faith, he walked on water. When you go out, he have your reservation will be made. It's already made. But I stressed too much. What am I going to do? Where's my camp spot? I want to do this. He's got it. He's got it under control. But after 2 days, but in the third day, he will raise us up. It's a beautiful understanding. So maybe November 2027, maybe not. We do not date set. But judging by these, he really loves us. And he wants us to come home to him in the truth first and sanctify ourselves, because he will come back the third day. And I don't look for that day. I have other charts that will show the events. And I believe I will speak on that a later day.